All right, if you're a Kiss fan, I think you're going to enjoy this video. And I know we have a lot of Kiss fans that watch these videos. And because we're going to talk about today a little bit about Kiss Alive 2. And the first album I ever got from Kiss was Rock and Roll Over. I got it when I was one of those little kids. I think I was 8 or 9, and some friend or relative had it, didn't want it, gave it to me, and I had my little record player, and I put it on. And it's so funny because I'm this little kid, and you listen to the song, and man, it is, if a little kid knew what those words meant, you know, but you don't. You just hear this cool sound, and it's just like so awesome. Well, then I don't know, I think this was the second record I ever got. This is Alive 2. I had this long before I got Alive 1. So this was really my introduction to that part of that world of Kiss, that part of them. And this is the one I had when I was a little kid. It is long since lost all the inserts. It's got gunk on it now. And there's the inside. I loved these pictures. When I was a kid, I used to just sit and stare at these things. And I'd stare at that picture on the inside. Because apparently when they took this picture, Paul Stanley, I saw an interview with him where he says the stage actually never looked like this. They did this just for this picture, where they basically, every explosion they had, they did all of them at the same time so they could get these photos of just the massive explosive nature of the concert. So anyway, so this album came out, and what I'm going to share with you today was I found, like I do a lot of times in this channel, I found a newspaper article that talks a little bit about Kiss, where they were at that point, and the fact that they had just put this album out, Kiss Alive 2, and they go into some detail about that. And if you're watching this rather than listening to it, you can see this picture that I remember seeing this picture in full color when I was a kid. And you can see Gene, Ace, Paul, Peter, you can see all of them in this picture. And it's so funny looking at these old things because it brings back all these memories of when I was this little kid. I just loved this stuff. And so I have a soft spot in my heart now still just for all this cool music. So anyway, I'm going to share this with you, and I'd love to get your feedback on this article, your thoughts, your memories about this stuff. And here we're going to jump into this. Okay, and this article is from The Messenger, January 11th, 1978, page 3. And the title of the article is Hard Music, Image, Make Kiss Legend. And then there's the picture I mentioned, and then right underneath the picture, it says rock group Kiss will appear at Evansville Roberts Stadium, January 23rd at 7:30. The group became an instant success overnight following the release of their first album, when they were discovered by the public to be distinctive dress and musical style. Advanced ticket sales are now being sold, and that is totally wrong. That they weren't an instant success with that first album. Following the release of their album, those first albums, at least if sales is a measure of success, were not successful. The thing that was successful was their live shows, and that's again getting back to the story about the first Alive album is what got them. Anyway, just kind of interesting. So here we go. So I'm going to read this article to you. Their driving music and distinctive image have made Kiss a legend in the relatively brief period that has followed the release of their first album. Now, by the way, that's true. When you talk about the amount of time that went between the first album and by the time they were huge, that's amazing. But you look back, it changed over time, where it got to where bands would put out an album every year and a half. Back in those early days, I mean, was it Grand Funk? I think their first 3 albums were put out inside of less than a year and a half. They had 3 albums out. And they were playing Madison Square Garden. I got to do a video about them sometime. And Kiss did the same thing. You know, it was like album, just putting things out. So different time. Okay. Let's see, Image may have made a relatively brief period of time that has followed the release of their first album, said Record World of the recent Kiss Forum show, during which time Alive 2 was recorded. Quote, one learns to expect certain hallmarks in pop music, and notable among them is the spectacular stage show of Kiss. In the face of new wave and punk rockers who might seemingly threaten to capture Kiss's audience, Kiss seems justifiably unconcerned. For while they may offer a similar musical fare, there is no peer in creating involved, elaborate stage effects, unquote. And by the way, it's interesting looking back now. because I was too young to really know what was going on at the time. I mean, when this album came out, I was 9. So, but when you put it in perspective, what was going on when this album came out? You know, you had the rise of disco, punk rock was happening, and then here's Kiss. And you had a lot of bands at that point, especially in the world of heavy metal, that were trying to find their way. What do we do here? And somehow Kiss just forged ahead, like he said there, seemingly unconcerned. Even though they did some things that you would think would destroy their career, they still just moved forward, and people just kind of stuck with them. And then a few years later, of course, they kind of fell apart, but that's a whole nother story for another video. Their new album, Alive 2, is their 8th, and even before its recording, the band has been responsible for worldwide sales in excess of $30 million. The release of Alive 2, which Kiss produced in conjunction with Eddie Kramer, comes just as previously released albums Love Gun, Rock and Roll Over, and their first live set, Alive, hit sales figures that stretch over the 2 million mark. Their 5th album, Destroyer, has likewise been certified platinum, representing the sale of over 1 million albums. And by the way, on another video that we're putting out, I think right around the same time this video comes out, we do a whole video talking about Bob Ezrin, and he was the one that produced Destroyer and kind of set that album. It's kind of sits on its own in the world of Kiss, the album Destroyer, and it's partly because of Bob Ezrin. And a hit single, Beth, had become a million seller for Kiss too. Again, all part of Destroyer. The Love Gun release marked the first time that all 4 Kiss members were featured in the lead vocal position, and Alive 2 maintains that diversity. Now, by the way, that was the first time. Love Gun was the first time all 4 of them sang, because I think Peter Criss sang Hooligan, and then of course Gene and Paul had their own songs, and then Ace Frehley sang a song called Shock Me, which ended up on here, didn't it? Yeah, it's on side 2. Shock Me. Now, Ace Frehley did not like his voice. He was not confident in his singing ability, but that was the first album that got him to actually do it, to sing a song. And it went along with what Kiss was trying to do. They had always seen themselves as kind of building on the idea of the Beatles, where you had these 4 distinct personalities. And when you talked about the Beatles, everybody had their favorite Beatle. And they wanted to create the same thing with Kiss. Who's your favorite member of Kiss? And I remember as a kid, some people liked Peter Criss, some people liked Ace. I mean, everybody had their favorite. Mine was Paul. But everybody had their favorite. And part of that Beatle idea was to have everybody be a singer. But up until the album Love Gun, they hadn't managed to do it, to get to Ace to be willing to actually sing a song. So then he did it. He wrote the song Shock Me, and he sang that on the album Love Gun. Now, little just in the weeds kind of thing that you should go do once this video's over and listen to. When you listen to Ace Frehley's voice, it's not a strong voice, but it is unique, and I love listening to him sing because of kind of the imperfect nature of what he does. And it's funny when you listen to him, he almost sounds like he's just going to go out of tune at any moment. And he kind of does a little bit. He's got this really interesting singing voice, and he was always very insecure about it, by the way. But he's kind of gotten over it when you listen to him, talk about it these days. But go listen to the studio version of Shock Me from that album, and there's a trick that they do with his voice. Now, when I say it's a trick, it's not that a lot of people have done this. This is not a unique idea, but it's something that some producers will do to cover up an imperfect singing voice. And what it's called is double tracking. And a lot of people do it, not just people that have trouble singing, but it is a way to help strengthen the voice of somebody who's a little bit out of tune. Because today it doesn't matter because you have auto-tune and you can fix anybody's voice and make it sound the magic of studio imagery and make them sound good. But listen to Ace Frehley on the song Shock Me on that album Love Gun. Because his voice is kind of imperfect, you'll hear it more clearly there than most other recordings where they double track. Put headphones on especially because it'll make it easier to hear. But if you listen closely, you'll hear Ace Frehley singing on top of himself. you'll hear his voice twice. And it really becomes obvious because there's little times where he just kind of pops in and out of being in tune. But when you put the two recordings together, two kind of imperfect, kind of like this voices, when you put them together in a recording, they kind of make each other work, and it gives you the illusion that it's very solid, strong, and in tune, when it's maybe just a little off. But it's a great, so if you listen to that album, Love Gun, that song specifically, you'll hear what they did in the studio to strengthen his voice. He was, like I said, very insecure about this. And you'll hear what's called double tracking. Anyway, it's worth checking out. All right, I didn't mean to get off on that, but it's just an interesting thing that they did this, marked the first time that all 4 KISS members were featured in the lead vocal position, and Alive 2 maintains that diversity. Because same thing on this album, because they do Shock Me, you'll hear Ace, Peter, you'll hear everybody singing on this album. As a live attraction, KISS is one of the top drawing acts in the world, and undisputedly the most popular band ever to emerge from New York. From the start, KISS placed a great emphasis on their stage presentation, utilizing such effects as fire breathing, blood spitting, and other visual accoutrements. At present, the group uses over $1 million worth of equipment, the newest set being made of chrome and glass and employing the largest amount of amplifiers ever used on stage. On their recent Japanese tour, KISS completed the most successful set of concerts since the Beatles appeared there. Riots occurred throughout the country when KISS appeared, with thousands gathering at the airport to greet, it says great, but it's greet the band. And it is pretty interesting because when people have talked about this ad nauseum. If you're a KISS fan, you've heard this a million times. But part of what happened when they went to Japan was, because Japan's the world of Godzilla and all the superheroes and all these monsters and whatever. And when KISS comes rolling into the country, it was like the superheroes in their anime come to life. And here they were flying in from America. And anyway, so they were, and as I recall, when they walked out of into the crowd, I think they got dressed completely up instead of just covering their faces. So the entrance into Japan, as I recall, I could be wrong about that. Correct me if I'm incorrect, but that was all part of that, going into Japan and kind of taking over. It's pretty cool. All right. KISS also won. This is crazy to think about this. This is crazy to think about this now. KISS also won the distinction in 1977 of being voted number one band by the Gallup poll, winning premier kudos by placing above the Beatles, Eagles, and Led Zeppelin. I saw an interview with Ace Frehley where he was even talking about this. Like, he goes, he was kind of going back and talking about these, like, we weren't anywhere near as good as Led Zeppelin, but it gives you a sense of just how popular they really, really were. They were huge. They were, so big that here's the Eagles, because this is Hotel California time. This is 30 million copies of Hotel California time, or however many they sold, 20 million, 25 million, something like that. And Beatles, and then Led Zeppelin. Come on, and anyway, they were voted best band. I just find that fascinating. Again, looking back, I don't mean to diminish KISS, because I'm a huge KISS fan, but even they go, come on. Okay. The group's outrageous makeup, elaborate costumes, and blazing rock and roll has transformed KISS into the superheroes in the eyes of their fans, who perceive the group as larger than life, a band apart from all other bands. KISS's following is one of the most loyal audiences in rock music. Often, they stare back at the group in their own versions of KISS makeup, making front page news throughout the United States, Europe, Australia, and Japan. Their fan club, the KISS Army, numbers in the tens of thousands and was originally formed when a fan in Terre Haute, Indiana, led a march on a local radio station to protest the absence of KISS records on the station's playlist. Recently, a KISS comic has been issued via the Marvel Comics Group, representing the first time ever a comic was based on real people or almost real people. That's kind of an interesting thing too, because when they put the makeup together, it really was, when it says real people, these were alter egos for these guys. And if you've ever read Paul Stanley's, what is his book? Is it Face the Music? I can't remember the name of his book. It's so interesting. I actually had him sign a copy of it. It's so fascinating because you really learn that that's what this, when you get to know him, you know, when he has that thing with his ear, and he was this super incredibly insecure person. And he tells us, you have to read the book, but he, you know, when he'd put on that makeup, he became the star child, the alter ego. He was no longer Stanley Eisen. I think that's he was now Paul Stanley, this bigger than life rock star, godlike character, you know, but then he'd take the makeup off and now he's back to being Stanley. And he was a very insecure guy. So they were real people, but they were all alter egos of who they wanted to be or who they aspired to be. And it was kind of interesting looking at it that way. The group was formed in late 1973 with the original teaming of bass player Gene Simmons, guitarist Paul Stanley, and drummer Peter Criss. The band began rehearsing as a trio and then added lead guitarist Space Ace Frehley, arriving at the present four-man lineup before playing their first professional gigs at a club called Coventry in Queens, New York. Their experiments with makeup began with those first performances. By the way, there's another, we put out another video on this channel where we read an article about them playing with the New York Dolls, which is also legendary. So if you haven't watched that, you should, after you watch this, you might want to go check that one out because it kind of goes into this period. Let's see, as their visual concepts developed, Kiss emerged with a powerful group persona. Each member of Kiss projects a wholly unique image. Gene Simmons is the tongue-thrusting vampire figure. Peter Criss is the whiskered feline. Ace Frehley, the silver eyes spaceman. And Paul Stanley, the star-eyed sex symbol with pouting lips. Soon after their first performances, the band was spotted by TV director Bill Aucoin, who took on their management and signed Kiss to Neil Bogart's Casablanca Records as the then fledgling label's first act. And that was a weird pairing when you look back at that. Their first album was released in February of 1974 and included Strutter, Nothing to Lose, Deuce, and several other songs that are still a mainstay of their live performances. Their second, Hotter Than Hell, was released at the end of 1974, and their third, Dressed to Kill, came out in early 1975. Again, listen to that. You know, just over a year, 3 albums. Kind of amazing. And then they go play a concert and they put out a live that same year. Let's see, Dressed to Kill came out early 75. It was their 4th album alive, a live recording that broke the band commercially, selling well over 2 million units in the United States alone and remaining on national album charts to this day. Alive had been produced by Eddie Kramer, known for his work with Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin. And that's the end of the article. Anyway, I thought you'd find that interesting. I love reading that stuff and looking at the perspective because this is pre-Dynasty. You know, this is when they were on top. And it's so fascinating listening to this stuff and what the thoughts were and how they were perceived at that time. I think it's just absolutely fascinating. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. Please, before you go, follow the channel, like the video, share your memories of this stuff. Did you own this album? What did you think of this? And did you have any of these others? And what were your thoughts about those at the time? And maybe more importantly, what are your thoughts about those albums now? Hey, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. Have yourself a fantastic day.